So if you haven't heard the news already, it's here. Finally, we got the announcement that was supposed to come at the end of the month. It is what we all expected. It is a new expansion. It is a story mode expansion. It is Return to Clockwork City. Obviously, I've just rushed home from work. I wanted to make a video right away. I've been gushing about what was revealed today pretty much all day, and I am excited to review it. So, first and foremost, it is a story mode expansion. It will be just like the Fall of the Dark Brotherhood, where you can pre-order the entire thing. You'll get some bonuses for pre-ordering. It is going to be $19.99 in United States dollars. I don't know what that will work out to your international currencies, but 20 bucks American will get you the entire thing pre-ordered. It is three acts of content, just like Fall of the Dark Brotherhood. The article states that that means we will get 35 missions and over 55 cards. So for a story expansion, that's actually a pretty significant number of cards. Certainly enough to hopefully shake things up. They included some preview cards, and that's what I'm going to go over. So besides just the announcement, let's take a look at what's been revealed so far and see what we're working with. So right out of the gate, they revealed Fabricants. They explained that these Fabricants are like half machine, half flesh. There is a cycle of them. They appear to be commons because the two that we see are both commons. And there's going to be one for each attribute. Now, these are interesting because they do something if you have a neutral card in play. Now, I think that it's really interesting because some of these are okay. Well, I guess one is okay and one is downright pretty bad if you don't have the neutral card, but let's take a look. First we have Hulking Fabricant. 5/5, if you have a neutral card in play, it is an 8/8. For the Kaguti, I'm probably slaughtering that. It's a 3/3, but if you have a neutral card in play, you summon a copy of it in the other lane, so it's like a mini Golden Saint. Now, what's interesting is a couple of things. First, with the core set and the existing sets, there are already some neutral cards that we're seeing play, you know, even in the smaller portions of the Magicka curve. So things like Hulking Crocodile, even a couple of decks were running things like Mudcrab Ankle Snapper. Those cards will easily activate the Fabricant. Now, this is a Clockwork City expansion. We'll get to them down below, but as you can imagine, there are some more neutral cards being introduced, some neat machines that might also trigger this. So how often you can trigger these is kind of yet to be seen. I think that's going to determine the value and how good this cycle of cards ends up actually being. But the other thing that I wanted to note that's particularly interesting to me is that it is a neutral card, not a neutral creature. So I don't know if this is going to count for items on creatures, like if you play a loot, for example, onto a creature, does that count as a neutral card in play? Certainly neutral supports should count, so something like Night Mother does at least look like on the surface it should be triggering the summon effects of these, and I think that will also provide some additional flexibility in trying to trigger the Fabricants. We've only seen these two, but I think it's pretty easy to speculate some of the other ones that we might see. We could see, you know, Intelligence might get something like a Royal Sage ability where you get keywords, or it wouldn't shock me if at least one of the attributes allows you to add something to your hand if you meet some requirements. It wouldn't shock me if we see other conditional effects as well that aren't just like buffs or further creation, but just fall into those attribute themes, right? The strength one might say like get charge. It might silence something. Green one could, I mean, we could get like a really broken budget Leaf Lurker. It's hard telling, but clearly it's going to be something attribute themed that will trigger if there is a neutral card in play. I like what these imply. I like the idea and the theme. For commons, I think these are some pretty sweet cards to show off right out of the gate. But we don't stop there. There is another new ability word that they show off. This is Treasure Hunt. So the first one they showcase is just a common. This is a 2-drop in strength. It's a 3/2, but it has Treasure Hunt. And then item after the dash, and it says give the item +1/+1. So Treasure Hunt is something that triggers when you draw all of the criteria for the treasure hunt. So in this case, it's an item. It's a single item. Once you have found your item, you get the trigger. Now this trigger is only one time. So if you have this guy in play and you draw 2 or 3 or 4 items, only the first item that you draw will get the +1/+1. But I think it's a pretty cool mechanic because it incentivizes you to put other things in your deck and then try to draw them. It's also important to note that cards like Plunder, for example, even though you're not drawing them from your deck, the article states that those will trigger these effects. So if we have something later that's like treasure hunt action, for example, something like you know, the Battle Mage's Onslaught would trigger that because it's adding an action to your hand or revealing the unseen. So that's really interesting. There is a second one that showcases that idea of you have to draw all of the options. So the second one is this Ratway Prospector. It is a 1-drop that is a 1/2, but it has a treasure hunt of support, item, and action. So in order for you to get this one-time trigger, you have to draw a support, an item, and an action. This gives it +5/+5, and after it attacks, it gains cover. So it would jump up to being a 6/7, and after every time it attacks, it gains cover, which is a pretty significant boost for a 1-drop, but it's also really difficult to pull off because it has to survive long enough for you to have drawn all of those options. One of the things that I'm interested in seeing is whether or not there's some sort of like visual effect that will show either you or your opponent if any of the criteria have been partially met. So for example, I'm curious to see if like if you draw a support, if that like highlights or something like that to let you and the other player know that that criteria has been met, or if it's like hidden and then magically it just pops off when you draw them all. Specifically because, as before I mentioned, Battle Mage's Onslaught. Battle Mage's Onslaught for the Prospector would give you an item, would give you an action, doesn't give you a support, but it would be an interesting scenario where like if you draw a support and there's some sort of visual cue, it might incentivize your opponent to then spend removal on this if they fear you playing something like Battle Mage's Onslaught. I'm just overall kind of curious to see how this is going to work, but I do think it's a cool mechanic. I think that the playability of any cards are going to obviously depend on the complexity of the treasure hunt, probably the hardiness of the creature in relation to the treasure hunt. Like it has to be you know, likely to survive long enough for you to get it off. And then, you know, the likelihood of you playing those cards in those classes. So going further down, we have a Factorum. So these are interesting. These are representative of the Sotha Sill creatures, the Clockwork constructs, if you're familiar with Clockwork City. And they're interesting because we are revisiting that idea of buffing stuff in your deck. So I know that Echo of Akatosh, when it was first printed, gave some people nightmares. Same thing with our old, you know, +2/+2 buddy who got nerfed to the +1/+1. But this one is interesting because it's only for Factorum. The ability is Assemble, and essentially the way that it works is that when you play an Assemble creature, you choose one of 2 bonuses. Then that bonus is applied to that creature and every other Factorum in your hand and deck. So the one that's showcased is a common. It's just a 1/2 for 3, and it has a symbol of +2/+0 and lethal. So when you play it for 3 the first time, it's either going to be a 1/2 lethal, or it's going to be just a vanilla 3/2, which for a 3-drop is not very good. However, every other time you play this creature, right? So when you play the second one, it's also going to maintain the previous effect. So if you picked, let's say, you know, +2/+0, right? The first one is a 3/2. When you play the second one is going to either be a 3/2 lethal or a 5/2. And then when you play the third one, it's going to be a 7/2 or a 5/2 lethal. And that's only counting this card. right? So these are like creatures that are going to level up the way Shouts did in Skyrim. But depending on the playability and the number of Factorum, because again, this is only the one that we've seen and it's only a common, I could see where this could potentially create some kind of like extra snowbally style of play where you know, the early game isn't super threatening, but the longer you go and the longer you go, the more powerful and the more threatening and the more hard-hitting your threats get as the game goes on. It could be a very interesting play style, and I'm curious to see how it plays out. Now, we didn't just get, you know, commons and, you know, quick teasers. We did get this. the Dark Elf. It's a unique legend. It's either Laneth or Laneth. I apologize, I don't know how to properly pronounce it. However, it is a 9-cost unique intelligence legend. It has a 6/6 body, and its summon effect is draw a card of your choice from your deck. If you've played Magic the Gathering, you know that tutor effects where you get to pick any card are really powerful. This is the first on-demand tutor for whatever you want effect in Elder Scrolls Legends. We have plenty of things where we have like what I would call pseudo tutor, right? We have things like Doggy Rot Mystic that once it pilfers gets a support, and if you build your deck a certain way, you'll always get that support. The most abused and perhaps most well known is Goblin Skulk, because it fetches a 0-cost card if you only put one of 0-cost cards in your deck. Same thing. The Altar, right, does the same thing. If you build your deck a certain way, you can create predictable outcomes of the Altar. But this one is literally like you play this, you get a 6/6 body, and you go get whatever card you want. This is really good for control. Control Mage is the immediate benefactor of this. On curve, at a minimum, it's, you know, if you're already stable, let's say you play your Dawn's Wrath on 8, that helps you stabilize. On turn 9, you drop this. That's guaranteeing that you'll have the on-curve Manticora for turn 10 if you don't already have it in your hand. If you already have it in your hand, maybe it fetches your Merak for the follow-up post-Manticora. This could guarantee the Odiving, the Parthenax. Maybe you're stabilizing post Dawn's Wrath, but you really need some health gain to feel comfortable, so you go fetch some health gain. And that's just for the control game. There are potential combo implications if we get some cool combo pieces with this set. Finding any piece of your combo is really important. Also, because it's a summon effect, cards like Dragon's Priest Mask become really interesting. Cards like Winterhold Illusionist, like Dark Rebirth, suddenly become very interesting with this card as well. So this card will see play. I fully expect it to be very good. I mean, it's a unique legend, but you know, the Fall of the Dark Brotherhood got Speaker Tyrannus as its unique legend, so that one was not as impactful in competitive decks, whereas this one certainly looks like it will be, based on what we know. Again, like all things, this is speculation, taking the cards we have and the cards that exist and speculating. The last thing they announced is if you complete Master Mode, you'll get alternate art Swims at Night. You may recognize the art. This is the art that Justin and I teased in our podcast, so now you know. It was, in fact, Swims at Night. They give you an extra bonus. Before, we got gems and like some titles for Master Mode. Now you get an alternate art card as well, which I think is pretty neat. Certainly better than nothing. Yeah. Oh, I should also note, Laneth here, that this is the alternate art card you get for the bundle. So, sorry, I'm zoning out here for a minute, and I apologize. So, when you pre-order, you get an alternate art card, right? So if you pay the $19.99 up front, you'll get an alternate art card, is what they're saying. And then they show you Laneth, and then the text below says, and that's not the only alternate art card we've got in store. So I think it's heavily implied that should you pre-order, Laneth is the one that you get. So you might want to take advantage of that. I could be wrong. Again, I'm just going based on the article, but this is what we have. So I'm excited. I think that just based on the very small handful of cards that we've seen, in fact, many of these are just commons, I think there's a lot to speculate about. I think there's a lot to be excited about. I'm really interested to see what some of the other cards are that are revealed that interact with things like Treasure Hunt, like Assemble. Overall, I'm excited for 35 new story missions. That feels like an awful lot of content and an awful lot of fun for 20 bucks. I don't think you can beat that, really. Yeah, let me know what you think about the cards that were previewed. Certainly, I'm really excited, but I'd like to hear what your take is. Also, I should note, probably going to talk about this a bit more on the podcast this week, so if you guys aren't familiar, Justin and I do a podcast. Last week, we previewed the art for Swims at Night. This week, I would say that we're likely going to be talking about the expansion. I think that's a pretty safe bet. And there might be some other surprises in store as well. So, you should try to catch that live. Or, like always, I'll put it up on YouTube after the fact. So keep an eye out for that as well. I love you guys. As always, thanks for watching. And until next time, may you walk on warm sands.